this year?
Matalolo has, yeah, and I mean, I'm just going, well, let's see, this was his 11th year. Okay, so yeah, this would, in his tenure, they won 8, then they won 10, they won 9, then they won 5, they won 8, 9, 8, 11, 9, 7. So this is only his 11th year of his tenure. This is only the second time they're not going to a bowl game and having a losing season. They go 3-9 straight up, 4-8 against the spread. And I didn't see this coming. I mean, they had Malcolm Perry, they had Zach Abey, 2 guys that can play running back and quarterback and do the types of things that you do in Nui Matalolo's offense. They did lose some close games, but they've just been an immense disappointment. And look at Army, 9-2, 6-4-1 against the spread. I think it's Army or pass. Whether I play Army or not, it won't be a strong opinion. The last time I played Army, it was against Miami of Ohio, and it was looking rosy the whole way. And then they allowed Miami of Ohio to get a couple touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and they won by 1 in overtime, laying. I think I had bought it at 7, but. So anyhow, I hadn't watched much of Army since, and I hadn't watched much of Navy either.
Yeah, and I discussed this before. It's Army or nothing for me as well. If you look at it on a yards per play perspective, on defense, Army is literally 1 yard per play better than them, and their passing game's even better when they have to do it. Navy had a little bit of a run at the end, but it looks to me that Central Florida was kind of dogging at that game. Not a whole reason to do it. Navy had to play for their pride. Now they're going to play a motivated team, a motivated team that is literally a yard per play better on defense, 3 yards per set of downs, that's a lot. That's a lot. And I almost think that Army's going to move it at will. When you saw Navy play or Air Force, which was another triple option team, you used the same theory of, a triple option team can stop a triple option team, but no, they got their butts kicked. Army beat Air Force, and Air Force is a good triple option team, probably a little bit under Army, but they're definitely over Navy. So I'm probably going to have to play this game since it's the only play. I play something on it every year. Usually it's the dog, but I'm going to lay the 7 on a very small opinion and very small side on that bet, my man.
And up in Philadelphia, so make sure to check the weather if you're looking at the total. I have not checked the weather as of yet, but those looking at the total need to do so. Yeah,
it's the lowest total ever, and it's went under, I think, like 12 years in a row or something crazy like that. But those totals were like at 50, 48 and stuff like that. Now they caught up and set a low total on it, and the only look for me would be the over, depending upon the weather. Like you said, of course, one fumble in the end zone can burn that 40 points, right? and that would screw it up completely. And so I definitely would lean towards the over unless we're getting a complete terrible game. So we'll keep our eyes on the weather. Looking at some of these bowl lines, my man, did anything kind of jump out to you? I know, it's real early. Not a ton of people are going to bet it unless they have the access. Some people are waiting for their Vegas trip and New Jersey trips and stuff like that. But, do you have any thoughts on some of the initial lines and possibly some of the line moves?
I could see LSU not being all that motivated. Going out to Phoenix, they're not going to have a huge contingent of fans. I think that UCF will be, completely jacked for that game. And with that line, north of 7, I'm thinking UCF. I mean, how many games in a row have they won? I don't know. 20-something. And, every one of them was by double digits this year except for the comeback win at Memphis. I mean, clearly the backup quarterback has acquitted himself quite well. I mentioned Greedy Williams is not going to play. What a heartbreaker for LSU, the 7 overtime game to end the season. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to be a huge play for me, but I mean, just kind of, looking at it, I had wrote down LSU 4.5 on Sunday, and that was with me not even thinking about, Greedy Williams or other players not playing. And again, I said Devin White is going to play, but Greedy Williams isn't. So I'd put at least a half point or maybe a point with Greedy. So to me, LSU should be like 3.5, 4, and they're 7.5. So UCF is a look. Kentucky's really struggled on offense.
Well, before you start in Kentucky, I want a quick piggyback on that LSU. Yeah, you know what's funny is that if anybody should want LSU to win, it's the whole SEC. It's the SEC network, ESPN, the committee, and everybody that made this game, because it's kind of an embarrassment to have an undefeated team the first year, and then they beat Auburn, and then the second year you place them against LSU. We were really putting yourself out there. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but does LSU have the motivation to play for the SEC when they haven't been the ones selected? Maybe they. I don't know if they have any bitterness or anything towards Alabama or anything, but that's a good question. Why would they want to play for the integrity of the SEC? I don't know.
Well, I tell you what. Toward that conversation, I think that a lot of the UCF haters, like to say that. The skill players for UCF are elite, but it's in the trenches where UCF cannot compete on a week-to-week basis. And whether they can on a week-to-week basis, we'll probably never find out unless they get into a big conference down the line. But if there's an example of that type of team in the SEC, it is LSU. They want to pound the rock. They want to play defense, ball control. This is a chance for them to get a 10-win season. Remember, they had their lowest season win total in ages, at 7.5 earlier in the year. So, I mean, if they want to be motivated, they can certainly be motivated. But toward your point with, UCF sticking it to the SEC in a second straight bowl game, if they were to do it to LSU, they'd really answer that question of, because LSU's that vintage type of SEC team where, strong in the trenches, and we're going to run it down your throat, et cetera. So that'll be a fascinating game there.
Yeah, and I've won bets on LSU against a smaller conference, especially during the Fournette years. I'd be like, they don't need to throw. They don't, and they shouldn't throw the ball the whole game. Then he
at Syracuse in a noon Eastern game when they got off to a slow start a couple years ago. That one rings a bell to me.
That could have been it. And there was another one, and I was just like, this spread is way too easy. They're playing some high flying, great offense, terrible against the run defense type group of 5 team. I forgot who it was. I can look back. But LSU really took care of business there, and I remember being happy about that one because they did it right. Now, if they make Burrow start throwing the ball and stuff, where UCF has some faster D-backs, and don't have to rely on their defensive line as much, that would be a huge mistake, I think, and definitely not something that that you'd want to back. So I think it was back in 2016 they played Louisville. That could have been they won 29-9. It wasn't an FBS team, but it was Louisville back then. So that's what I was thinking. They should be an FBS team this year or FCS team this year, but
right. Oh my God,
or group of 5.
The auto fade on Louisville was really good down the stretch. I couldn't pull the trigger with Kentucky though because I have no faith in their offense the final week. But I should have just stuck with the auto fade Louisville. I mean, that team quit after that FSU game in mid-October.
Yeah, that season win total hit almost as quick as our Nebraska one. Now, if Nebraska had one more game at 6 instead of 6.5, I would have been sweating that one for a while. But they lost their first 6 and won the next 4 or something, 4 or 5. So that was a great job by Frost. And we'll be looking towards Frost next year, I believe, my man. What do you have next on the docket?
Well, I was just going to say that Kentucky's really struggling on offense, and now their defense is still really good. But I definitely lean Penn State in that one. Penn State's defense played, pretty good down the stretch. Only gave up 10 to Wisconsin. I mean, not that Rutgers, 7 to Rutgers, 3 to Maryland. But, that was a Maryland team that had just, scored 51 on Ohio State 2 weeks before that, I think it was. So I lean Penn State against Kentucky. Rose Bowl, I wrote down Ohio State 6, so I think it's a good line. Georgia, I wrote down 11.5, 12. It's sitting at 11, so I think that's a pretty good line.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote down 3 for Michigan. So now I still don't trust Felipe Franks, but Emory Jones has one more game he can play, and still keep the red shirt on him. So Jones can play in that game if Frank struggles. So I kind of lean Florida at plus 7.5. I had written down 7.5 on South Carolina, but that was before, finding out about Debo, and they still got so many defensive injuries. I'm actually pulling up now. It looks like, oh wow, Shi Smith's questionable too. Bryson Allen Williams might get back. But DJ Wanham's out for the season. That's their best D lineman. So those are just a few quick hit thoughts. Oh, on Alabama, I wrote down. Oh, and by the way, this is their Oklahoma's richest underdog spot since the Sugar Bowl when they were catching like 16.5, 17 to Bama and beat them by 2 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. And Oklahoma's 2-1 against the spread in 3 games as underdog under Lincoln Riley, with the one non-cover and loss being against Georgia in the that epic instant classic game where they're plus 2.5. They lose 54-48 in double overtime. So Oklahoma's outright their other 2 dog spots under Lincoln Riley. That's a fascinating game to me, Kiev. And I've kind of talked, even as bad as Oklahoma's defense has been, I kind of talked myself into the last 3 or 4 weeks thinking that outside of Clemson and Georgia, that I think Oklahoma, and first of all, I don't think Alabama's going to lose, but I didn't think the game with Georgia was going to be that much of a nail biter either. But I think Oklahoma can test them. Obviously, I think Alabama's going to be able to score at will, but
total of 79.
Yeah, hence that total. Yeah, I just think Oklahoma. I think they're going to score a lot on Bama, and so if you can get a turnover, a play on special teams, whatever, we'll see. I give Oklahoma a chance in that game.
I was on Georgia, and I thought that it ended up being a good call and not too much of a sweater here. Obviously, was pretty happy going the whole game, minus the money line sprinkle. But we had a nice big old fat one on the side. One thing about that game is that Tua looked terrible, I thought, in the first half. This wasn't the Tua that we were used to, and that helped me. And secondly, you wonder how healthy he is, and that ankle, lots of different reports, and you wonder if that was the rule, meaning the big games he gets nervous and messes up and misses receivers, or if that was just the exception and he's going to go being back to old Tool, because those Big 12 defenses are not good. And let's just say they ran the ball the whole time. They didn't face too many offenses that just pounded the ball and could get 3.5 or more yards even against a stacked box. Alabama can. And if Alabama's smart, they're running the ball the whole day and just controlling the time of possession and letting their defense work, in my opinion. So that what makes me nervous about Oklahoma. It's hard to, you're in between conferences here. A lot of people last year tried to fade Oklahoma, and they almost won that game outright against Georgia and choked, And now you have kind of like the same offense, or even some ways better with the way Kyler Murray runs. Yet the defense is worse, ranking like 100 something in points allowed as well as yards per play. So I think this could get real ugly for Oklahoma. I actually thought Ohio State would be able to put up a slightly better show against that team. And as much as, even if you dislike Urban Meyer, it didn't matter. Look what he did when he had to. Look at how they play when they had to. It's the talent. that they had the talent on defense, I thought they could match up a little bit more. So I guess my line would have been like 10.5 against Ohio State and 13.5 against Oklahoma.